Good morning, good morning, good morning.
How are
Good
you?
morning, everyone. We are we are live. Ian, I know you've literally just jumped
Let's
straight.
just something.
We, we are live on LinkedIn. Please do not swear, Ian. So morning, Ian. So for those that don't know, we normally do this bit off camera, but we're live. So Ian, how's your week been? Let's just sort of check in with how Ian's doing.
Do you know it's really funny? So, since I've moved out of teaching into the third sector, working with schools, the
Yeah.
rhythm is completely different. So, whereas in schools, December is just absolute chaos, isn't it?
Yeah.
My December is very, very quiet, and I can't wait. Whereas my November is chaos because everyone's
Yeah.
trying to get in the work now before Christmas concert madness takes over. So, it's been
Yeah.
very busy, but very good. But I can't complain.
Good.
I like being busy. It keeps me out of trouble.
Yeah, of course, of course. And where are you joining from? Just where's you're in Wales, right?
Yes, in Cardiff.
In
So
Cardiff.
I've been in Cardiff, yeah, in South Wales all my life. From a
Yeah.
little town called Bridgend. My mum would not let me move further away. She's the typical Welsh mum. It's like you can move away, but you can go 20 minutes down the road. That's where you're
Oh,
allowed to go. Yeah.
that's very sweet. That's very sweet. But yeah, I'm so glad that you managed to sort of like find us in the tech. I know it's a little bit different, the behind the scenes thing to going live on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, it's not as straightforward as going live on Instagram or Facebook or something. For this one, you actually have to go through a streaming
Oh,
platform.
it's,
So
it's
yeah,
all good learning. It's my first, and I am a LinkedIn live virgin. This is my first one, so it's very, very
amazing.
exciting.
Well, so many jokes, so little time.
Especially for this time in the morning. I haven't had enough
Yeah.
coffee yet, so yeah.
Yeah, of course. But good morning. Good morning to anybody that's joining us. I've got the amazing Ian Timbrell from It's More Than Flags and Rainbows. Well, actually, your book's called It's More Than Flags and Rainbows, from the organization More Than Flags and Rainbows. So if you are joining us this morning on a relatively mild morning, I want to say, a little bit windy, but it's relatively mild. Please do say good morning in the chat. Let us know what you're up to, where you're joining from, and if you've got any specific questions for Ian as well, because we will be talking about the broad, the broad topic of kind of removing the barriers and how we engage across the LGBTQ plus community. So we'll be talking about the broad topic and also specific around educating children. Good morning, Junior. Ian's looking slightly confused at the comment there. So Junior affectionately calls me Oprah, which I'm going to take like 24/7. I'll take that. Good
There's
morning,
worse
Oprah
people to
and
be
friends.
called.
Maybe that's what we need to call this, Junior.
Oprah and
But
friends. You have to give stuff away then, don't you? And one for you, and
yeah,
one for
yeah,
you.
yeah. You get it. Yeah. What am I gonna
Yeah,
give away? I don't
yeah.
know. Junior,
Okay.
give me some ideas. What am I gonna give? But happy Friday, Junior. Hope you've had a really good week. So Ian, for your information, Junior is usually one of the first actually on here to pop up and say good morning. But Junior heads up an employee network at NatWest, and he's the global multicultural lead, global multicultural co-chair. But he used to chair the Rainbow Network as well. So yeah, perfect.
Yes.
Thank you, Junior, for joining us. Always great to see you. And yeah, so I have got with me the incredible Ian Timbrell from More Than Flags and Rainbows. Um, just tell us, Ian, just a little bit about your journey from teaching. So for those that don't know, Ian is an educator by background, so schools, small humans, and then you're now in the world of still, I guess, educating and sort of bringing education and learning and development into schools, but from a very different perspective. Which I absolutely love, and the organisation. The title sort of gives it away, More Than Flags and Rainbows. But just tell us a little bit about your journey from the classroom to this, because it is an incredible story.
I mean,
Um,
I always do unexpected things. So I
yeah.
never wanted to be a teacher. Actually, go on, Shell. What do you think my first job I wanted to be was? What did I go to university for?
Do you know what? I should have looked this up and stalked it. Journalism, maybe?
Oh, not even close.
No.
No. I was going to be a brain surgeon. I went to medical school.
No way.
And it did not work out for many reasons. But yeah, that was my original plan. And I sort of fell into teaching when I was a bit older. And it was really weird because I went to university to be a doctor because that's what everyone in school told me I should do.
Yeah.
You know, typically it was the Labour government at the time. Everyone had to go to university, you know, even if you didn't want to. But also, you know, I was good at maths and science, so you have to do medicine. And I hated it. I hated it. And I fell into teaching. Simply, I'd lost my job and I went to volunteer in a school and loved it and never looked back. And my career has been littered with random things. So I became IT advisor for a year over 4 local authorities.
Right.
My initials are ICT. So it was the perfect job. And then I worked in a school with incredibly high deprivation. We had 65% free school meals for 12 years. I was there altogether, including as a student, and I loved it. It was great. And then it was time for me to get a deputy headship, and I moved to a deputy head school. And the school I went to was amazing, and I loved it. It wasn't amazing in terms of standards when I got there, and the head and I had a huge job to do to turn it around, but we did, and we were incredibly proud. But towards the end of my time there, I've been there about 4 years. And I was looking at headships, and to be honest, looking back, I didn't want to be a head. I just didn't want. But you're not allowed to say that as deputy. You're not allowed to say, "Oh, I want to stop at deputy head." You have to be head, you know. And even I would have people tell me, "Oh, you're blocking the way for other people," and things like that, you know. But yeah, I sort of went through it. But anyway, 2 things happened which meant I left teaching. One was we did a whole unit on gender neutral fashion, and we learned about the history of fashion, learned about the history of high heels. So like the fact that high heels were originally invented for men in the military, and you know, and things like that. And the children designed either gender neutral or gender sort of unexpected clothing. You know, they replayed the gender, and it was fab. The stuff in year 5 was amazing. And one of the kids dared me to wear a pair of heels. And I did, but I got quite big feet, and so I could only get like drag queen stripper heels. That's all I could get.
What they call like pleasers, I want to say.
Please,
it's only 8:37 in the morning. I'm on it already. Yeah, something like that, maybe. Yeah.
Oh my god, you should have seen me, right? I was like in my little flat, wobbling for 2 weeks trying to walk in these heels. It was so funny.
No way.
No, I did this fashion show, and the kids thought it was brilliant. They loved it, and it really helped to reduce stigma around clothing in our school. It really did a huge impact. And suddenly I became a viral sensation, and this picture was online. It was everywhere, millions and millions of views, and most of the comments were really supportive, but unfortunately there were some horrific comments, including a death threat at one point. And you know, all because a man wore a pair of heels. You know, and the worst thing about it was nothing from our community was amazing. They were so supportive. It was all from external. But the local authority I worked for just didn't know what to do, and they put it all on me to fix. And I'm a bit like, hang on a minute, you're supposed to be looking after my well-being, not the other way around. So that happened. We got over it. It was fine. The internet moved on to something else. I did have the reputation as the teacher in heels, and there is a chapter in the book called "The Teacher in Heels." But then about a couple of months later, I had a pupil refuse to come to school because I was gay. And I'm not like in school, I wasn't, you know, dancing in the corridor with pride flags or anything like that. You know, I simply, at the beginning of the year, I introduced a photo of my family, and we're like, this is my son, and we are his 2 dads. That's it, you know? And again, the support that we tried to find was dreadful. It just wasn't there. And we got training from a very well-known LGBT charity, and honest to God, it was the worst training I've ever had. That charity no longer works in schools, which I spoke to the CEO of the charity not long ago, and I'm very glad, because it was delivered by non-educators. And I just thought, you know what? No one's doing this work certainly in South Wales. And I was like, so I'm going to. And I put a letter into my governing body to have a sabbatical, went on a 6-month sabbatical and never went back. And now we're a incorporated community interest company, a not-for-profit with 2 members of staff incoming next year. So it's been a roller coaster of unexpected things.
And here you are now.
Yes. Now, literally, I laugh about one of the cornerstones of my training, right, is, look, gay people, for example, just want to get on with their lives. They don't want to talk about it all day. And I have literally made a career out of talking about being gay. I'm just the irony in that statement when I train.
Yeah, you're living up to the stereotype.
With also painted nails. And yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Do you know what I was going to say about the nails? Is it, it looks a bit like a duck egg blue, but is it something else?
It is. It's like, yeah, it is very expensive. £1 from Claire's Accessories.
Or it actually looks a bit like there's like a Farrow and Ball color, I want to say, called French grey or something.
Right, can we delete the last comment? I didn't get it from Claire Accessories. This is Farrell and Ball. It's very fun and expensive. Absolutely. Yeah,
amazing. I'm going to dive back into the comments, just see who we've got on. We've got on Andrea. Good morning, Andrea. Andrea is a former network leader. I don't know whether you're still leading a network, Andrea, in your new place. I'd love to know. Let me know. Junior has put here, the fact that Cheryl knows what pleasers are has sent me. Yeah.
I have never heard that phrase. Literally, when we finish, I'm going to be Googling pleasers. I mean, I'm not going to do it on my laptop. I'll do my personal one, just just in case. For people who are just joining, they're probably going, "What on earth is going on?"
Yeah. What is this? Like, is this LinkedIn? Like, this professional social media platform? Good morning, Natasha. How are you doing? Natasha is also we've got a few network chairs on this morning. Natasha is network co-chair for blah, 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 blah. I can't remember the name. I cannot remember. Prism at the Co-op group. So at Co-op PLC, as in like the shops Co-op. Amazing, lovely to see you, Natasha. Nat, actually, as she prefers to be called, and then Emma Claire as well. Love the nail color; it's subtle but lovely. Yeah, absolutely incredible. So, a few fans on it already. Let's get into it. We could just sit and talk about pleasers and nail polish, right? But we won't do that. So you talked about, obviously, big part of your journey in terms of why you're doing the work that you're doing is the experience that you had in terms of, quite a horrendous experience at some points as well. One of the things that we talked about when we were like prepping for this call, I was sort of like reflecting as somebody that's, I guess older than you are. I've seen things sort of, and I sort of, when I grew up, Section 28 was in play, right? So I grew up, early 70s. And so I've seen that, but then I've seen things get better and there'd be more acceptance. But it feels like now things have gotten worse again. So what, do you agree with that, first of all? Why do you think that is? What changes have you seen, in schools and beyond?
I think it's a really complex situation, because I think one of the reasons that we see it more is because of social media. So whereas 20 years ago, if it was happening, you just didn't know about it. You'd only find out about it because of the media. So I think we have to bear that in mind, that for the first time, this information about any type of prejudice is at our fingertips. So that we have to bear that in mind. But I think that what we're seeing is almost the return of the more extreme views, which for a long time you just wouldn't say. And one of the reasons we're seeing that is because politicians are saying it. There is a certain select number of politicians who are saying things, who, and I'm not going to name them on here, but say things because they want to provoke reaction. But what that does then is it gives everyone else the permission to say these horrific things. The lies that are spread about LGBT people, particularly about trans people. But and I think that's what we're seeing is the extremists. I don't think it's more people. I am an optimist. I feel like actually the majority of people are more accepting than ever. There is this extremist group that are louder and more confident. The things they say, particularly when it comes to homophobia, transphobia, and racism, are just so extreme now. We only have to look at the immigration debate, don't we? And the things that are said there. And I think that those people are emboldened. But I think because of social media now, whereas even 10 years ago, they would have been an isolated person. Now they've got their collective community that they can join. And so they embolden each other. And I think that's what we're seeing, is that this group of people are getting louder and louder. But I am an optimist, and I do, I go into hundreds and hundreds of schools, and it is most kids just, they might say silly things they don't really think through, but actually the vast majority don't want to be hurtful. They don't want to be nasty. They don't want to be homophobic or transphobic. I think I am an optimist in that way.
I think I'd agree with that. I do think there are fewer people that are homophobic or transphobic as well. And what you were saying there about social media, there's something about it's like the amplification effect of just one or two individuals, especially if they're organized, which we know that happens on social media. It even happens on LinkedIn as well. When people get organized and they have almost like a cabal, right? I'm not going to go all conspiracy theorist on us, but sometimes people have, they have like a little group, sometimes people have groups offline on WhatsApp, and they all sort of like, coordinate that, when one person posts, they're going to all pile on, or if somebody posts on a particular topic, and it amplifies it as though that's what the majority think, when in fact that's not the case, right?
No, and I think that's the trouble, is these people, many of these people you see in these groups, the leaders are very well connected people, but the followers you often see are quite vulnerable people, and don't necessarily have those networks in person. So from their perspective, everyone they are speaking to every day holds the same views as themselves. So convinced into thinking that that's what society is thinking, but actually it's not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you talked about sort of like the role of politics, media, social media, etc. I guess which of those, how do you think things have changed? So if I look back to like when I was younger, I would say that the media played a massive role, the typical rags, but actually all of them were, there was always, it was always a big deal about like outing a celebrity, or you know what I mean? Like it was like huge. But do you almost think that like social media and or politics has taken over the role of the media in almost like the stigmatization?
I think the media has very little impact anymore, really. I think where they do have an impact is, for example, certain news stations and newspapers, they then use social media. So they know that their actual news channel or their newspaper or a magazine or whatever they are, that's not where the power lies anymore. And what we're seeing is quite provocative headlines designed to cause engagement on social media. And they're often very, very misleading. But what you get, loads of people going on, they don't want to pay to read the article. They assume what the article's about and pile on with their prejudice, and that again, that's a huge issue, because whereas previously you'd have watched a news article, you'd have heard all of the sides and everything like that. Now people are literally just reading the headline. The newspapers particularly have caught on to knowing that we can make loads of money out of that, because we don't need people to read the article. We can make money. All we need is someone to click on something to get an ad, and we make money,
exactly.
So I think that social media has a lot to answer for. I think if I had the solution, I think I'd be a billionaire. And I think the cat is out of the bag. I think that's the trouble, is we can't put it back in now. So we have to work out as a society, how do we educate young people to see through all of that nonsense?
Well, I mean, there's a rabbit hole that we may go down into in terms of social media, but before we dive into that rabbit hole, politics. So you mentioned, politicians might say something. I mean, we have seen, I think it's fair to say, and not just in the UK, if we think about in the US, what was his name? DeSantis.
Oh, Ron DeSantis.
Ron DeSantis. And, so there's a few like key individuals, Ron DeSantis. And then if you think about, some of the key figures here as well, there almost has been, there's been a real weaponization, that's the term I would use, or politicization in particular of homophobia and transphobia as well, actually, or at least, the politicians themselves wouldn't say it's homophobia or transphobia. No. They would say it's
protecting children. That's the line.
Which always was kind of like that's always the default. That's always the the go-to reason. Why do you think that now, like in 2020, 2023, 4, 5, why do you think that so many politicians and high-profile politicians have gone for the LGBTQ plus community?
I think it's an easy target because if we think about, the Equality Act only came in 2003, so it's still relatively new in terms of in terms of equality in legal terms. It's still very, very new, so it's still fragile, I think. And I do think that there was a sense of complacency around, particularly around homophobia, where when great, it's tackled, it's gone. I know certainly I was complacent about it. I didn't receive homophobia for maybe 15 years. So I went, great, we've solved it. But actually that complacency, what it did then is has allowed other people to use it as a weapon. Because it's not embedded in society yet. And I think that what we're seeing is very skilled politicians, and no matter what you think of him, Trump is a very skilled politician. He wouldn't become president of the United States without it. May not be the politics you like, but you can't argue with his results. And what he's very, very good at is making people angry, because if you make people angry, they post about it. If they post about it, your name is appearing everywhere. And this is the thing, it is that old trope of any news is good news, or what's that? Any, you know what I mean?
Any publicity or something.
That's everything. And it is. And Trump has probably got it. If you look at where he is on everything all of the time, he does more social media, more interviews than any other president in history. Because he knows that what he wants to do is swamp the world with anger. And he goes after many, many, many different targets. So it's not just LGBT people. They're just one of a series of people he goes after, because he knows he'll then get those headlines. And all you need is someone to be angry about one thing he brings up, and they'll vote for you. And we're starting to see that in the UK. We're starting to see that with a certain party in the UK that is properly putting out all of these, dog whistles. And calling for it, because they don't need to agree with 99 out of 10 of the policies. All they need to do is agree with one that they get angry about, and then they'll vote for you. And I think that's it. It's not targeting LGBT people. It is using LGBT people to, it's the same with small boats, isn't it? It is not about immigration. It's using that argument to get money and attention.
I've never heard somebody talk about that as a strategy for Trump before. So I'm literally, my brain is like
I did not come up with it. I'm not just an analyst. Lewis Goodall on the News Agents talks about it quite often.
That's so interesting.
And when you see it, and you do see, because he literally floods. He doesn't like, the whole thing about the interview with Zelensky in Ukraine. He doesn't care. And I think the LGBT people are just the latest people. So, for example, this week he cancelled World AIDS Day in America. And they know the US government is no longer going to be recognizing World AIDS Day. And, that's not because for any rational reason, but he knows now you've got loads of people going out and shouting about it, and Trump's name, as you mentioned, again and again and again and again. It's that type of thing. It's,
My mind is blown. My mind is literally blown. I am going to have to properly delve into that. I tell you why, because I'm going to circle back on this rabbit hole, and then I'm going to dive into the comments a little bit. But I was listening to Desert Island Discs, right? Because I am really old, right? With Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who created, obviously, the World.
I listened to that one. Yes, I did listen to that.
And he was talking, wasn't he, about that he thought that the algorithms. So two things. First of all, that the algorithms are addictive and it should be illegal. But also, I've been reading some other stuff that he says, and it's about how the algorithms are fueling anger, and also are fueled by anger. Do you know what I mean? And so when you said there about, actually some of this is really just about people that are using anger as a strategy to effectively to accumulate power, right? This is what it's about ultimately. And effectively then different communities become the target of that, because they see that it's an effective way of galvanizing support. It's crazy, right?
It is. And, and we do see it for certain political persuasions using it. But unfortunately, the other side haven't got a defense at the moment. And I often said this, you know, if we're whatever your opinion of the Labour Party at the moment, the one thing you can say is their communication is dreadful, and you've got people shouting these awful things. Where is the opposition to it?
Absolutely.
It's meek. It's not brave enough. And actually, the reason that, for example, if we talk about LGBT rights, the reason it changed is because of protest, because of loud voice, because of people who weren't afraid to stand up and say that things need to change. And I don't feel, particularly on the left, that that voice is there. And unfortunately, you know, certain political parties are using this method very, very well.
Yeah. Let me just dive into the comments in here and just sort of see who's on. Andrea, so I can see that you said that you're taking a break from leading the network. It's tiring work, Andrea. I totally hear you. But you're a chair at a school governing board. So this session, we're going to get into the angle specifically from schools shortly. So we'll be doing that. Raj Kumar, good morning. Thank you for joining. Keep challenging the stereotype. Love the painted nails. In my local council office in London, we have a senior management team member gets his nails painted whenever they take a session with senior management. Absolutely, right? It's what it's about. Good morning, Sylvia. Hope you are well. Emma Claire has said, the internet also allows people to insult anonymously, and anonymous people, things they wouldn't say about Bob next door, they would say about a generalized group. Yeah, it sort of dehumanizes, doesn't it? It has this dehumanizing effect in terms of the way we interact. And then Nat has said, I put so much faith in our youth. So it's a bit of optimism, thankfully, seeing the way my children and their peers talking gender diversity or taking gender diversity, all diversity in their stride is so uplifting. I mean, the kids are totally leading the way on gender diversity. It's kind of almost like a non-subject, right? Whereas in the workplace, we're like getting all aerated about pronouns and all of that. Anger as an easy path to engagement. Yeah, good morning, Adrienne. It's a really fun. Honestly, you've really got me thinking about that one, and in terms of as a strategy, and I will definitely delve into that. Let's get onto the positive bit. What is it that helps to reduce homophobia and transphobia, and what is the role that parents and schools and organisations, etc., can play to actually, especially to get kids when they're young? What is it that we can do? What works?
But homophobia and transphobia essentially comes from sexism, and misogyny. That is where they come from, because they don't conform to the strict, rigid gender roles in society. And that's why if you've got two men in a relationship, you don't tend to hear it very often. But certainly when I came out, one of the questions you'd always get asked was, who's the woman? And I'm like, what are you actually asking here? Are you asking which one of us does the dishes? Because if that's the case, how misogynistic of you. If you're asking which one of us is a particular position, then I know it's not even 9 o'clock in the morning.
It's fine. It's fine. We've done pleasers and everything already.
I know, yeah. But I'm like, what are you actually asking in that question? But that's where it all comes from, and particularly because often LGBT people, because they take more time to navigate their identity, often become more confident with their identity. I only saw an interview with Piers Morgan recently where it was talking about crying and was like, God, no woman wants a man who can cry. And you're like, his sort of view of masculinity, he expected everyone else to have exactly the same view. And actually the view I take is that's fine to have as your view of masculinity, is if that's how you view it, but that doesn't mean I have to agree the same. And for example, like painting my nails, like Inga, is hilarious because I started doing it when I was 40. It's the most lame midlife crisis ever, right? But you wouldn't believe, I was in a conference a couple months ago with talking to a head teacher, my hands behind my back. And I literally went like that. I had rainbow colored nails because it was Pride Month, and he stopped talking mid-sentence when he saw my nails and walked away.
No.
And I was like, I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. So that's what we have to always think as schools. What we're trying to undo is those rigid gender and sex expectations. So from the very, very young age, showing books with diverse families, showing books where we're challenging those stereotypes with all types of stereotypes. And the one thing I always say, particularly when we're talking about, key stage 1, foundation phase, foundation stage, don't teach about diversity, just show it. So, for example, I don't need a book that says, this is two dads. This is some families have two dads. What I need to do is show a book like this, which is a book about baking. It's a beautiful story, but it happens to have two dads in it.
Right.
You know, if I've got a book with children that have disabilities, it's not talk about the disabilities as a lesson. Let's just have the character with a disability in a story. Because actually, what sometimes happens with marginalized communities is we get that's literally all our life is. It is. We don't talk about anything else. You know, so that's disability or race or sexuality, gender. So we need to instill that from the very early days of childhood. And we have to make sure our classrooms aren't accidentally reinforcing gender. So you know, I went recently one where they were doing weddings. It was a lovely wedding. They gave the girls a wedding dress to design. They gave the boys a wedding suit to design. I said, well, why have you done that? Why can't they just design whatever they want? A friend of mine who is straight got married in a suit. Is that wrong? You know, is she wrong? We need to be really careful that we're not accidentally reinforcing those. So that's the first thing when we're younger. But actually, when children get older, then we need to actually call it out. And, you know, and keep actually talking about homophobic phrases, particularly if so gay. Every school I work in at the moment pretty much tells me there's an issue with kids saying it's so gay. And the excuse I always get is, oh, but they don't mean it like that. Okay, let me flip it for you then. If it was a particular racist term, like the N word, would you say, oh, but they didn't mean it like that? No, you wouldn't. You would shut it down immediately. And actually, there is this is where I think LGBT has got work has got a lot of to learn from anti-racism work. And I've talked about it recently. I do think it has a lot to learn. I think there's far better zero tolerance in anti-racism. On homophobia. And actually, do you know what? If they don't know what it means. So as a teacher, did you explain what it meant and told them it's not okay? Because if you let them go on and on saying it, it's not good enough. So we have to have that zero tolerance around that language and educate. And when we get to secondary school, you know, it's really, for me, it's about showing the support and the role models and giving the groups to different people that they access and things like that. So there are, you know, it's being really proactive, but to me, it all starts in the early years. I think the pressure is often put in secondary schools, but actually, if we start that work in the early years, the long-term impact will be far.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, so much to cover there, Ian. But when, you know, as you were talking about the, you know, you where you started with, you know, you sort of said it's linked to sexism and misogyny. And I started thinking about, because the gender coding, right? The coding that we have, the traditional norms. The book, The Patriarchs, I don't know if you've come across it, The Patriarchs by Angela Saini. In that book, I mean, she's excellent, you know, and she's done a lot of YouTube videos and stuff like that, so people can check it out. But within that book, you know, the book isn't just about, you know, even though the subtitle is How Men Came to Rule, but actually a lot of the book is about gender norms and the fact that when you look at lots of other different societies, particularly historically, the gender norms weren't the same. You know, even societies where women were actually quite physical and in size actually was sort of more similar to the men because they didn't starve themselves to stay skinny. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's really interesting how when you start to realize that, you know, there aren't as many differences as people purport, right? And especially when it gets to how the brain works and all of that. So yeah, there's something I think for us as adults about how we challenge our views of gender norms, you know, like you were saying, in terms of, you know, those questions that you ask, you know, what is or isn't acceptable or appropriate. So I think we've got some educating to do of ourselves, do you know what I mean, in terms of whether that be about sort of like gender roles, whether it be about even just like, you know, the biology of sex and gender, you know, get really educated, especially if you're in the kind of education and training space. So I wanted to pick up on a couple of comments. Andrea said here, it's absolutely wild what people think it's acceptable to ask when they realize you're part of the LGBT community. I've had a fair few intrusive questions about how we created our family. What would you say about that? How do you respond to questions like that about, you know, that are, you know, bordering on rude?
So I always flip it. So, for example, one of the comments that used to always be said to me was, I've got a lovely activity that I do where I say to people, right, I give them all questions that they've got to ask each other. And one of them is like, when did you turn straight? You know, when can you be my straight best friend? You know, oh, you're straight. That's such a waste. You know? And honestly, but they do exactly what you're doing. They laugh, and it's so funny. And they're just like, "Oh my god, no one would ever say these things, like, wouldn't they?" Because all you do is change one word. And you know, I have been told you're gay. It's such a waste. You know, is it? I'm married. I have a child. I run a very successful organization. I have a lovely house. What's a waste exactly? I'm just like, you know, I know it's coming from a good place. It really is. You know, and that thing of say it. And so that's why I always get people to, you know, if someone says to me now, no, who's the man, who's the woman? I float back to them and go, which one of you is the man and woman then? Because I'm not sure. And you see the bamboozlement in their face as if to go, but hang on a minute. So I always flip it back as if to go, would you, if you just got to change that word? And it works really well for other aspects as well, you know, like race, for example, and things like that. Would you ask the majority?
If you would you ask that for the majority?
No,
I
because
love that.
Does add, you know, the minority stress model, which, you know, it does add stress to people who feel like they constantly have to give away details of their life that are not, quite frankly, none of your business. But I have to say, with that caveat, I know it always comes from a good place. 9% of the time it comes from a good place. It is people's ignorance about it, and actually what we do, rather than asking that question, push it back to them with a question, because then they will learn and they will reflect. You know, we have to appreciate that everyone is on a journey. When I think back, I grew up in this little village in Wales. It was all white middle class people, right? That was it. It was honestly, it was like a conference for a certain political party. And so I remember when I got to A levels, I had a friend who was born in Bridgend, but had parents from Jamaica. Think of the things that I used to say to him. Oh my God, they're horrific. And now I want to crawl inside and hide. And he was really good at just not answering the question, just flipping it back to me about why was I asking that question in the first place. And it was really educational for me, as if to go, oh God, actually, that's not okay to ask. But it always, the questions I always asked came from a good place. And I think sometimes we have to understand the difference between someone who's been deliberately prejudiced and someone who is just asking questions because they haven't really thought it through. You know, and that's that intent, you know. Honestly, I do. I still cringe. Like 30 years later, I just go, oh my God, I can't believe you said those things. You know.
And it links to, you know, I know we were talking about this when we had like our initial conversation. It links to, you know, we're all on a journey, right? We're all the time. We're always learning. We're always developing. And so there is an element, as you say, you know, nine times out of 10, and we're going to get into Junior's comment, 9 times out of 10, it's coming from a positive intent, you know, and there is that saying, assume positive intent. So 9 times out of 10, we can give people a bit of grace and have that conversation, and hopefully that then sort of nips it in the bud. And hopefully, you know, then when we potentially make a mistake or a little bit clumsy with our words, somebody gives us that same grace, right?
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, when we're talking about homophobia in schools, you know, and I do, that's why I would say to teachers, is the first time you hear it, assume positive intent, educate them on why it's wrong. But after that, there is zero excuse. And the problem, what we see in schools, particularly with homophobia, is they have their second chance, then they have their third chance, then they have their fourth chance, and it doesn't escalate. And then they wonder why it doesn't stop. You know, but it is important. If we go in like a ton of bricks and a child genuinely doesn't know what the issue is, actually you have a risk that you could reinforce those prejudice because they might blame that minority. So it is important. But once we've given people that education, there's no excuse.
I want to pick up on Junior's comment here. So he's obviously put here, you know, one of the protected characteristics is belief, and we've started to see a rise in people using belief as a reason to be openly but subtly phobic. I'm curious, Junior, I don't know whether you're on, but I'm curious as to whether this is just around gender and like the gender critical, or whether you've whether you've encompassed in that as also potentially, for example, religious belief that maybe, sort of like doesn't align with LGBT identity. Just if you could clarify that.
Just
I think there might be a slight difference.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this week, there was a court case about a man who sued NatWest because they had a rainbow flag logo, because he said because of his protected belief it caused him distress. And I read this genuinely going, oh, this actually went to court. Like, genuinely, this guy saw the NatWest rainbow flag logo, sued them. And lost, because you are allowed to believe whatever you want. That case, we have to appreciate that everyone's beliefs are formed from their environment and the people around them. They are entitled, but that just doesn't excuse you to behave you want. And there is a misunderstanding of that in the Equality Act. I often see that people think that it's a bit like, in America, you are allowed. So in many places in America, for example, you can refuse service to someone. There is no Equality Act like we do.
Yeah.
In the UK, you can believe whatever you want. And what I say to schools where parents might come in and go, this goes against our beliefs, it's about being transparent, but about saying these are the values of our school. And by sending your child to our school, you agree to those values. And once I turned around to a parent when I was deputy head and said, do you know what? There is a school down the road that maybe would more align with your beliefs. They went and they were back within 2 weeks, and actually we have to be strong by our values in schools. Children are sent to your school, and if they are, the parents have agreed to your values, and we have to stand by them. They have to be able to believe whatever they want. I mean, they can dictate what goes on in the school.
Do you know what? I love that. And it links back to, so Junior, in terms of, I know like the end of Junior's point there was around, companies getting scared of being sued for forcing LGBT narratives on people. And it's been an interesting twist. So this is, I spoke about this a while ago with somebody else, and it links, I think, to what you were saying, Ian, around either being very clear about your values, but also being clear about where you stand on things. Companies can pull together, for example, a position statement that says, this is what we're about. Like, when it comes to this topic, this is where we're about, especially if it's something that, has come up or keeps coming up, or somebody's got, just be really crystal clear. And then if people want to happy, to work within that organization, etc., they can do. If they don't, they can, there's the door sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? So, but there is and the reason I asked Junior about the gender critical thing, I think there is a different conversation, I think, to be had around how to handle the gender critical beliefs and that whole topic. Maybe I need to do a LinkedIn Live literally just about that. Any volunteers, please see me after class.
We've got lots of offshoots. We've already got the nails one.
Yeah.
We've got the politics.
Yeah. See me after class if anybody's volunteering to so Junior said here it started with trans folks, but it's spreading. They're going for the easy targets first, and there are more women involved in this than you think, which is ironic. I'm not surprised by that, actually, Junior, that there are more women, because there's been such a coordinated campaign around this. That's the only way that I'm gonna say it right. We haven't even really got long enough to do the whole gender critical thing, but there's been such a coordinated campaign, and then the politicization of it, that there's almost now the populist narrative, right? The mainstream narrative is bending a certain way. That's the only way I can describe it in the limited time that we've got. But I need to get somebody on here, and we'll really delve into the gender critical debate.
And it was one thing that was interesting, when I wrote my book, it was one thing. Originally, I had a whole section about gender critical views. It was really interesting. My publisher and I went back and forth. So my book is about a step-by-step guide to creating an inclusive school space.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. We went back and forth. And actually, in the end, we took it out because we said, while people need to know what gender critical views are, who are we writing it for? Because the people, if you are gender critical, this probably is not the book for you. You know, and actually it could be potentially inviting in unwarranted criticism, you know, and that actually why I decided in the end I had to really go back to thinking about who am I writing this book for, and actually that's why I decided to take that out in the end.
The one thing I would if you are sort of like struggling with this, the one perspective that I think helps, and I think the gender critical perspective is a really useful example for this. The one book I would recommend, so to the folks in the comments who are leading networks, who are having to navigate around individuals in your organization that do hold gender critical beliefs, and then I guess thinking about, you know, schools and stuff, you'll have parents that have those views, right? So the one book that I find useful in getting my head around some of this, if just parking the facts for the moment, right, that go into these arguments, there's a really great book, and if anybody knows me, they know it's one of my favorite books. It's called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, right? But it goes into this concept that's called moral foundation theory, and it explains how there are many beliefs and values that are based on morals. And these are morals. These are things like, some of it have like religious foundations. Some of it is about, you know, patriotism, loyalty to the flag, sanctity. There's all, you know, and basically what the book basically says is when people have set morals, it's very difficult actually to rationalize them out into different arguments. Do you know what I mean? It's a really, really difficult area. And I think that is a really useful framework that I would recommend. I mean, if you are leading an LGBTQ plus network, I would really recommend that book, because it gives some really practical examples of sometimes how people hold on to certain views and they can't even necessarily explain why they hold that view. They just do, right? And there's just almost sometimes there's just an element of, we just have to accept that they hold a different view and then figure out how do we coexist in the same organization or on the same planet, right? I don't know if that helps, Junior. Hopefully it does. But I think we need to, I will take an action to pick up on that at some point. I'm gonna bring the conversation back, Ian, to More Than Flags and Rainbows, because I know that you know, the book and everything is kind of like all just the start. You know, where are you hoping to take it over the next few years, and why is it called More Than Flags and Rainbows?
So the name came from a school in Swansea invited me in to see their amazing LGBT work. And honestly, it looked like a unicorn had crapped over the school, right? So there was rainbows everywhere you looked, right? Everyone had rainbow lanyards on, pronoun pin badges. They had a pride club. They had a pride event, everything. The tick box of LGBT inclusion was full, right?
Yeah.
And then I had what I always do when I go to a school. So one of the things I do is I go into a school, spend the day in the school, and I do what's called a health check. It's an audit, but we don't like the word audit. And so one of the first things I do is I get the oldest pupils, so if it's primary, year 6, if it's secondary, sixth formers, to give me a tour. And they tell you everything. And I said to the sixth formers, I was like, what's it like for a pupil who comes out in this school? And they went, no one comes out in this school. And I was like, why? I was like, oh, because they'd be bullied straight away. So they were doing all of these visual things, which are important. Visual things can make a real difference, but without actually making kids feel safe, they're a waste of time. And actually, rather than changing their culture, which that's what needed to change, they were doing all the surface level stuff. And at that time when I did that, I was a freelancer, so I was just my own name, you know, and that's where the idea of More Than Flags and Rainbows came from, because I had seen many, and LGBT organizations are very, very guilty of doing this, of saying this is your starting point, is to get lanyards or put flags up. And I'm like, no, that's the last step. The first step is like staff understanding, is policies, is looking at the culture, looking at your curriculum, all that background stuff. So that actually we can say, this is why we're putting the flags up, because we are an inclusive space. Otherwise, it's almost fraudulent if you just put the flags up. Or there's no these companies that just change their logo to rainbows for Pride Month, but actually don't do anything for their LGBT staff. So it is. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have flags and rainbows, but it's much, much more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of people in the comments would agree with that as well. It's a lot more than it is, you know, it's what the book, it's what it says on the tin. It's a lot more. And in terms of over the next few years, because I spotted something, you were hiring and stuff, right? So what are you, where is this going
Oh
to?
my gosh.
It's turning into like,
so I have ADHD, right? And I like a new project. But no, I'm going with what people tell me they need. That's what's happening with this organization. I set it up so I have 2 volunteer directors, and we've got a pool of about 10 other volunteers that help. I always said that this isn't about me and what I think we want, because I haven't been in the classroom for 3.5 years, so I have to bear that in mind. You know, I have to think, actually, so one of the things that came up in our very, very early days was the biggest issue they had was parent understanding of bullying. So, you know, I applied for a grant, and we've produced these leaflets that are freely available on our website that what to do if your child's been bullied, and they're written with schools, so they're all about how to, because that we've had thousands of downloads of them, you know, and if anyone wants them, send me a message, I can send some copies.
Amazing.
But, you know, so it's going with that. And then the next thing that sort of happened was, and this is where the health check came from, actually, lots of schools said, we don't want you to come in and do training and just go. We want you to come in and do work with us so we can do it ourselves, you know? And I think that's where that came from. But yeah, the next steps are, we just appointed our first full-time members, employed member staff, which is going to run an adoption network in South Wales for adopted LGBT single-sex families, which I'm so excited about, as being an adopter myself. And this is groundbreaking. You're going to get an exclusive, Cheryl. So yes,
well, you know, you heard it here first. Oprah and Friends, right?
Yesterday, I received a grant to employ a member of staff to run Welsh language training for schools, because you know, there is, you know, a third of Welsh schools are Welsh schools, Welsh medium. So my son, for example, went to Welsh primary school where you weren't allowed to speak English. Lots of people don't even know this exists. But unfortunately, there is no one really delivering LGBT inclusion in Welsh, and it's very, very different because the language is different, the colloquial terms are different, you know, and the way, particularly because Welsh is a gendered language, so you have masculine and feminine nouns, so it's very different. And one of the hilarious things about it is that with pronouns, the pronoun for she in Welsh is he. So in HR, it's really confusing, right? So I'm very much listening to people, and one of the biggest things that we've got a resource coming out in a couple of weeks, which is basically got a list of about 100 questions that families may ask you about any aspect of inclusion and how to answer them. And this came from a comment from a nursery school, and we just don't know how to answer the questions. And what I always say to the schools I work with and the organization is, tell me what you want and I'll do it. If you don't tell me, I probably won't know. So, you know, it's that constant engagement and listening to schools. And I think I go into schools all the time and say, you have to listen to your community. You have to listen to your children. So it would be really hypocritical of me if I didn't listen to what schools needed, if I just sat on my high horse and made what I thought needed. But I think, you know, that's why we've been really successful, because the schools are telling us what they need and want, and we're it for them, because we have the time, and sometimes we have access to the funds. So I don't know where I'm going to be in a year. I really don't know.
Whatever the need is.
I'll have, my eventual aim is that I shut More Than Flags and Rainbows down. You know, that is, if we do this work well enough, shut it down. I'll have to get another job then. God knows what that'll be. But you know, I just am going with what people tell us they need. For me, that's the most important thing, and I think that's what politicians aren't doing.
I mean, you know, some of what you've talked about, it really sort of sparked a few thoughts for me, you know, for some of the individuals in the comments, you know, things like you know, networks, working with different networks. So obviously we've got, you know, sort of like LGBTQ plus networks represented in the comments, but I'm always talking about, you know, collaborating. So, you know, and some of the folks on the call will know this. So collaborating with, for example, women's networks to make sure that there is that close working, the allyship, the tackling the whole gender critical thing, but also, you know, working with the, you know, families or parents and carers network around things like policies around, you know, whether it be adoption leave or carers leave, etc. And all of those things that impact on everyone. So that working together across networks is incredibly important. We're going to wrap up with our final question. If for everybody that's watching, or anybody that's watching this, whether it's live or on the replay, could do just one thing this year to make the LGBTQ plus community safer, what would it be?
Oh God, that's a question, Cheryl. I got to pick one thing.
One thing.
I think for me, it would be to stand up to your values. It would be to actually develop your confidence enough to turn around and say to someone, no, these are our values. This is what we're going to do, whatever, and not buckle to pressure from any pressure groups. Because if you feel that actually, you know, if you want to be a real ally, you cannot just give up when times get tough. You have to be there no matter what. And that's what I think I would ask, and just stand by your work, whether that means going to a Pride event or running a Pride network. It doesn't matter, or even just wearing a pin. It doesn't matter what it is, but just, you know, stand by your values and don't give up.
Your values.
Times potentially in a couple of years' time could get very tough. Yeah,
love that. Nat, I love this. You've got a high. How's it pronounced? How did you pronounce it?
So that's basically she, her.
Okay, badge that you wear when you're at the Iris Prize Film Festival. I love a film festival. Amazing.
Yes, and these are our pronoun badges. So we've got A is they, them, and then you've got A, they is he, him. So
amazing.
And if anyone is a Welsh speaker, I also English speaking ones, I can send you a link.
Where's the best place for people to connect with you to find out more about what you do and potentially, you know, get you to come in and help with anything they're doing?
Yeah, so our website is www.morethanflagsandrainbows.com, or just Google More Than Flags and Rainbows. And on there, you'll find information from schools and businesses about the training and workshops we do. You'll find free resources for that. You'll also find our family section, which has got our anti-bullying resources and links to our adoption network. And you'll also find our shop, which has got ally badges, pronoun badges, Christmas jumpers for the first time. So t-shirts, but 100% of the profits go back into making anti-bullying resources for schools. So if you're looking for stocking fillers, or you've got an LGBT person in your life who'd like something lovely, so there's some, actually our most popular ones. We've got t-shirts with a planet with a trans flag and a planet with a rainbow flag on. And the school I work with just down the road, they've just bought them for all their staff, and they're all wearing them. They wear them as their uniform. So lovely.
Nice.
So but if anyone, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. We do training for organizations, particularly those young people. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you, Cheryl.
Oh, likewise. Thank you. And thank you, everybody that's been in the comments, honestly, especially if you've been with us literally since the start. You know, thank you so much for being with us for nearly an hour. This is probably the second longest ever one of these that I've done, Ian. And, you know, credit to you, because it was just
we didn't even get deep into some of the most important topics, such as nails, you know.
Exactly
That's part two.
Thank you so much, honestly, for joining us, everybody, for nearly an hour. And if you're watching on the replay, thank you so much for taking 58 minutes out of your day to watch us. We're gonna get out of here because people have got things to do, right? But see you all soon. Ian, thank you so much for joining us this Friday morning. Everybody, have an amazing, fantastic week.